Thank you, Bruno. I think it's very fitting to talk about ethics and how you resolve ethical conflicts at this time of year, and especially after the year we've had. So very grateful that you can present today. Just to say, well, I'm not quite sure what to say about Bruno because I think he's in transformation at the moment, transforming from his academic life to his semi-retired life because he's still very active. He was for many years a senior lecturer at the Lucerne University of Applied Science and Arts. His main interest there was in communication, ethics, and theory of science. He's a philosopher. He's a fan of Roy Basker. He's also into logotherapy, and he's a keen hiker and cyclist, occasional visitor to the Outer Hebrides in Scotland. And I think as well, he's a musician, so he's extremely accomplished person. Also count him as a dear friend and a collaborator who co-wrote the meta-thinking book with me. Well, I think that's enough from me. Bruno, if you're ready, I'll hand over the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Nick, for this introduction and for inviting me to this CAD meeting. It's an honor to present my work here. So let's start with the presentation. It's about applied dialectics in ethical dialogue. That means that I always try to apply dialectics, for example, in ethical discussions, in discourses, and also with my students. And this evening I want to present you this article or chapter in the handbook for handbook of dialectical thinking. And this is the basis for the presentation. And the title is Ethics and Dialectical Thinking. And in this article, I try to develop a model for analyzing and resolving value conflict. And the basis is dialectical thinking. So this presentation has 3 parts. I would like to start with an ethical dilemma. It's a real dilemma. It's about people analytics in a big Swiss company, and there I want to show how an ethical dilemma arises and how dialectical or dialectical thinking could help to solve it. There's no guarantee for solving ethical dilemmas, as you for sure you know, but it could help, and dialectical thinking could help and show which are the preconditions and what are the steps to come to a solution. And then I would like to show my model, to comment on it, to present it, and also talk about the sources of this model and how I constructed it and how I would apply it to this ethical dilemma of people analytics. And then I would like to show the application of the model in a didactic application. It's a class, Intercultural Business Ethics. It was a project and a class in my school, business school of the Lucerne University of Applied Sciences. And there we have used this model or a model of ethical problem solving for business problems. And we presented these case studies to groups of mixed students from China, from South Africa, and then we tried to find solutions for ethical problems. And what came out? But it's a didactic project, so that means that we used it to learn how to argue, how to use the model, and hopefully to find good solutions. And then we will have time to discuss the model, or the people analytics case, or even the didactic project in the culture business ethics. Okay, so then let me start with the case. People analytics, I'm sure you know now we can use a lot of data. Companies can use employees' data to do people analytics. This is a big advantage for the employer. For example, here the example is a Swiss digital service provider, a big company, about 3,000 or 4,000 employees, and for the human resource management, it would be very interesting to know which kind of skills the employees have, so they can manage the resources. They would like to provide also education, trainings, and so on for the skills they need in 3 years or 5 years. But first, they have to know which kind of skills the employees they have, and so they want now, or they collect data about the employer and their skills. But for the employees, um, there's another perspective on this people analytics case. We have digital transformation. They have to adapt their skills. They have to learn new skills. But if the employer collects all the data, so there is a fear of the transparent employee. I don't know if this word exists in English, but in German we would call this the transparente Mitarbeiter, or the transparente Kunde, the transparent customer also we talk about. So that the employer knows everything about the employees, even private data would be used and so on. And there is a problem with privacy of the employees' data, and you see there's a conflict between privacy and efficiency. Yeah? And this is a typical value conflict, and it's a standard problem in business ethics. And I would like to show how dialectical thinking could help to bring this conflict to a solution. So, is there an ethical acceptable solution for this conflict? I think there is, and the company has implemented some kind of an acceptable solution, technical solution for both sides. But we are more interested in the process, how to find this. By the way, privacy is a human right. I don't know if you know, but Article 12 of the UN Human Rights Charter says no one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon his honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to protection of the law against such interference for attacks. That means privacy also for data. Data privacy has a good basis in human rights. But you know, as you know, human rights are not understand in the same way in different cultures. And if you have a look at, for example, data privacy, the cultures that deal very different with this topic. For example, between the European countries and the US, there's a big difference. What is privacy? To whom belong the data, for example? Who has autonomy on the data, on the use of the data? And there's also a big difference between Chinese people, Chinese culture, and European culture and US culture. So this is a very interesting case for digital ethics or intercultural ethics. Okay, so I'd like to come to my model, a model for analyzing and resolving value conflicts. The basis is the book Nick Shannon and I have written 4 or 5 years ago. And these are the 4, we call them modes of dialectical thinking. Otto would call them classes of thought forms. There are 4. Michael Bessages has also developed 4 classes of thought forms. Roy Bhaskar is talking about modes of reality, or modalities of reality, aspects of reality. So Roy Bhaskar is talking about ontology. We are talking here about epistemology, that means about thinking. And Nick and I had a lot of discussions about that. We never agreed, but it doesn't matter. We are talking now about thinking, dialectical thinking, and you can say we have at least 4 modes of thinking, dialectical thinking. Structure, for example, something can be part of a larger whole, and depending on which perspective or view you have, a sentence could be right or wrong. It changes how big your perspective is, or a process. That's the second mode of thinking. That means something is true today, but tomorrow it will be false, and it will change. It depends on the time you have a look at the problem. And then relationship means that there is a common ground of different things. It could be common ground of natural processes, or it could be social processes or social communities also. Here we're talking about values, so there could be a common ground. For example, human rights could be a common ground if we understand them in the same way to solve value conflicts. And the fourth category or mode of thinking is transformation. That means how shall we use the knowledge, or the knowledge we got by the 3 other modes of thinking to change living system, to change reality. And this is the transformational aspect of thinking. That's the next step would be acting. So these are our 4 categories of thinking, or modes of thinking, dialectical thinking. I don't go in details here. You can read the details in our book, Meta Thinking. You can read Otto's book. I learned dialectical thinking from Otto, to be honest. He was my first source for this. And then I discovered also Roy Bhaskar, but this was the basis. In our book, we describe these 4 modes of thinking also as a process. You can think through in a systematic way a problem, an ethical problem, or an epistemological or practical problem, applying these 4 modes of thinking. You can think about the structure of the problem. You can think how this problem has evolved. What is the common ground for the problem, and then how to implement, for example, measures to improve the situation. This is a very practical model to solve problems in reality. Personally, I use the model also in my everyday thinking. And the second model I also use are the 4 quadrants Ken Wilber has developed. For me, the combination of the models are very useful in everyday situations, but also in teaching. And this was also the basis for our meta-thinking book. Just a couple of words about these 4 quadrants. Or if you have different perspective on the same thing or problem or whatever you want to think about, you have always an interior and an exterior side. And you have also an individual and a collective side of the object, of this thing, of this group, or whatever it is, or a problem. And then if you combine these dimensions, the interior and the individual, then you have the inner side of an object, or of a group, or of a problem. For example, the I dimension, or I quadrant, that means what we have in our mind, thoughts, feelings, values, and so on. If you combine individual and exterior, that means the behavioral aspect, means what you do, your actions. And if you combine interior and collective, this is the cultural, the interior side of a group, for example, what the group thinks as a collective, and then the exterior side, and collective dimension combined. That means the social or natural environment of this of an object or phenomenon. So you have the two models. Go back, the dialectical thinking cycle and the integral quadrants, and together they form a powerful thinking tool, right, to deal to tackle with ethical problems. And now we use, or I use, also in classes, we use this dialectical thinking cycle to deal with ethical problems. I would describe ethical problems as conflicting values, so value conflicts, and we try to teach students to think through an ethical issue, an ethical problem in 5 steps using dialectical thinking. The first step is identifying values. For example, for the people analytics problem we discussed before, we could think, who are the stakeholders, who are the actors, what are the values, what are the technical solutions up to now they used, and so on. Then the second step would be analyzing the values. And here I would like to show you how we concretely help the students to think through. And also in my article, I presented guiding questions. Otto would call them mind-opening questions. So we call them guiding questions. Analyzing value. You could ask, for example, what is the issue of value conflict? What are the roles? These are structural questions. But you could now ask which actions of the actors hurt the other side or have hurt the other side. How did the conflict arise? How far did it escalate, and so on? What are possible further developments of the conflict? These are questions for the process. Analyzing the values in guiding questions for the process, and so on. And now you see there is a prevalence for process questions for the second step. And if I go back, for example, for the first step, there's a prevalence for the structural questions. In the third step, there's a prevalence for the I lost for this relationship thinking modes and implementing means transformation. There's not a one-to-one correspondence, but one kind of thinking in these dialectical thinking circles helps specifically for one of these steps. And at the end, you can reflect on each of these phases in the thinking cycle so that you, for example, add new stakeholders, you add new values, and think through again the problem. So this is thinking through a problem. And for example, for the people analytics problem, this company, they tried to involve also the employees in a discourse, in ethical discourse, what their needs are, how to find a common solution which could be accepted by the employees and by the employer. So they have to find a common ground of values which is acceptable for both. If you now use the Wilber quadrants, the integral quadrants to analyze this people analytics problem, we have the rights, privacy of the employees. We have the employer's efficiency, interest, and that is the problem. Then there could be different concepts of privacy depending on where you live. For example, in Switzerland or in European countries, we don't have the same, or I don't have the same concept of privacy as perhaps you have if you live in the US or if you live in China. So it could be also a difference or a conflict between the individual concept of privacy and the collective concept of privacy. And I have to mention also that the legal system is not the same as the ethical concept. So we're not talking about about the legal system, it's about ethics here. But it will be influenced, for sure. The cultural and the legal system will influence the ethics you use. So you see, these are the conflicts. And now, as Nick told you in the beginning, I taught, for example, digital ethics. And if you now have a look at the quadrants and make a list of all the values which are perhaps used or which are also endangered by digital technologies, it's quite a list. And I don't go in details, but they are values, ethical values, for example, autonomy. That means, for example, data autonomy, that I can decide what happens with my data, that only I decide if my data is collected, I decide whether my data is sold or if there exists a profile on my private life and so on. This is my autonomy. And this is, for example, protected in Switzerland, also in European countries. There's a law now also, GDPR. It's not the same as in the US, for example. It's not the same in China. So we can now use these ethical values for analyzing ethical conflicts and try to bring them together, to find a common ground, to find a synthesis for the interest, values and rights of the shareholders, the stakeholders, not shareholders, stakeholders or the actors. There's also a list of on-values. I know this is not an English word, but Nick didn't correct it in my article, so I use it again. You see, there are quite a list of on-values, as I called them. For example, you can harm someone psychologically, or you can harm someone physically by digital technologies. Here, we're talking about psychological harm. If someone collects your data and publishes your data, private data on you, this will cause psychological harm and so on. So I don't go in details, but you see the values and unvalues are a good starting point to analyze value conflicts and then trying to find a solution, common ground for them. This is, I think it's a good way to deal with value conflicts. If you're interested in how we use them, you can have a look at our handbook for digital ethics. I will show the two handbooks I am talking about today. At the end, they are open access books. You can download them for free. But I would like to go on just to show how we can use this this model and the four quadrants for analyzing and solving value conflicts. For example, a first typology, a first case of a conflict, a value conflict, is within one quadrant. And now we could develop a whole typology of value conflicts if you want. But I just want to give you an idea. For example, in one quadrant, the interior lower quadrant, for example, there could be a conflict between I and you. We is not just a block, a monolithic block. If you find or try to find a common basis for values, for example, this is quite a dialectical process that we can agree on common values. So I and you is not the same as we in any case. The Wilber quadrants don't show this dialectical process in this quadrant, but for example, you can have in a company, you can have group members with quite different values. They have to work together. Another value conflict could be between two quadrants. For example, between the V quadrant and the X quadrant. For example, if a company has a value statement, and in this value statement they talk about respect of humans and the respect of the natural environment, but they also talk about profitability. And as you know, that there are huge conflicts between the two values, and how they will solve this tension, this conflict. It's a conflict between we and it's. And there are conflicts, value conflicts, which touch all the four quadrants. I just want to give you one example: whistleblower. As you know, a whistleblower is someone who makes public unethical behavior to newspaper or to social media and so on. There are many conflicts for such a person, internally, interior, individually. Should I go outside or not? There's a conflict with the collective, with the group. I learned a word from my colleague, Gordon Miller, who is teaching together with me. In the group, he or she would be the fowler of the nest, as it Nestbeschmutzer in German, and so on. There is a conflict with the rules in the company, with the law, and so on. In Switzerland, whistleblowers are not protected, for example. I don't know how this is in your country, and so on. There are lots of conflict for this case. But the problem solving scheme, I think, is helpful with the quadrants and with the step in analyzing and solving these problems. I suggest in my article that we use such a step-by-step model to solve value conflicts in public. We should publicly talk about such value conflicts. We should invite the stakeholders and analyze their values, interests, and rights, and try to find common ground. This is also one of the thinking modes. And the same, this is publicly. And as you know, for example, Jürgen Habermas developed the discourse ethics, and this is exactly the procedure we use in trying to solve value conflicts. You have to invite all the stakeholders, and the solution should be acceptable by all the stakeholders, and this can only be the solution for a value conflict. This is an ideal community, but this is the guiding principle how to solve value conflict. We can discuss this later if you want, no problem. In my view, this is the comment, public discourse is a dialectical process, and you can use dialectical thinking, modes of dialectical thinking in solving value conflicts in public. In my view, you can also use dialectical thinking and this thinking cycle in an inner dialogue. So you can have an inner dialogue with yourself. In my view, for example, dialectical thinking, I would define as an inner dialogue with yourself. I know not everybody in our meeting will agree on this, but for me, dialogic and dialectic is very close. For me, dialectical thinking is a dialogue in one mind. We can also use this, we can also discuss this later. So this is the basis, the basic idea of this model of analyzing and solving value conflicts. And now I would like to go on to this teaching project in the cultural business ethics, give you an idea how we can use such a model in applied ethics teaching at the university. So just want to give you some feedback, some context knowledge. So it's a joint project of 3 universities, University of Johannesburg, and it was Anusha Makka who was a partner for the project, and then a Chinese university, University of International Business and Economics in Beijing, and Liu Baozheng and Li Xiaosong were the project partners, and 3 of my colleagues here at my school, the business school, at the University of Applied Sciences and Arts in Lucerne, were part of the project. We developed the project together, which now I would like to to explain what the aims, the objectives are. So in all the three universities, there are intercultural business ethics classes. And the idea was that the students work together to solve the same problems on an intercultural basis. They try to bring in their values from their different cultural backgrounds and try to solve an ethical dilemma. And this is not easy, as you can imagine. And could be that the students cannot find a solution. This is also a result, but they should try to find a solution and give good reasons why it was so difficult to find a solution or to present a solution. And they should also make a decision. Whenever possible, they should come to a decision or to agree to disagree. This was also possible. And at the end, there was also a social objective. The students should work together, make personal contacts. Perhaps they will have contact also after the project. Our colleagues on the other universities are now also our colleagues. We talk together also on topics not only for our schools. So it's an opportunity also to make contacts between colleagues, between students, and between teachers. As you see, there are different ethical backgrounds. For example, there are African values. There's a specific Ubuntu ethics. I don't know if you know this. It's a community ethics, very interesting. For example, Nelson Mandela used this kind of ethics when he had to reconcile the country after the apartheid. This is an incredible task, but this was one of the ethics which has been applied for this reconciliation process. There are Confucian ethics, socialist Chinese value systems, and so on. European Swiss values, which we used in our discussion, and we taught also virtue ethics, deontological ethics, and utilitarian ethics, the traditional Western ethics, as we call them. And there are also intercultural values, for example, human dignity, human rights. Almost all the countries have signed this human rights charter, and so this should be a common ground. This is the list of cases. We have developed about 20 cases on different topics, work and leadership topics, international investments and trade topics, marketing and advertising topics, technology topics, ecological topics, intercultural topics. Don't go through the lists in detail, but this is the list from which the students could choose one case they wanted to deal with. At the beginning, we built the mixed groups, and then the groups should agree on one of the cases they will deal with and try to find a good solution. What is a task for the group? They should produce at the end a short video. We have shown the video also on the closed learning platform. They are not publicly accessible, but the students could have access to the videos. So they should produce a short video, 8 to 10 minutes. And the contents, the minimal content is a description of the case. What is the problem? Then ethical reasoning, the value discussion, you could say, and then a short introduction of the group members. And perhaps they have a solution of the problem, or they should say why they couldn't find a common solution. And they had about 8 weeks time to produce the video, including the discussion, including the get to know, and so on. We use this template for ethical decision making, analysis and decision making. And as you see, it's almost the same as I presented before. So this is a kind of a standard we use in our project on the applied ethics for digital ethics and for intercultural business ethics. So this is the way how we teach a student think about ethical problems. I don't go in details here because I already presented the model before. There are also coaching sessions for the groups, at least 2. They can have more than 2 sessions if it's needed. Some groups need it more than 2, but 2 are the standards. Each group has a coach, and the coach is allocated to the group on the basis of his or her knowledge, if whenever possible. The first meeting is about the topic, about the process and so on, about technology. It's not easy to find a common ground for technology. For example, which kind of tool should you use? By the way, for example, you cannot use WhatsApp in China. It's not possible. In Switzerland, it's difficult to use, for example, WeChat, the Chinese tool, and so on. Another tool, for example, the Zoom meeting we use here cannot be started by Chinese students, for example. It can be started by Swiss or South African students, then they can invite Chinese students and so on. They had to find a common technological basis to work together. And then there's a second meeting, intermediate meeting. Whenever there are problems, they could talk to the coach, for example, if they have problems for the values, different values, the conflicts, or how to make progress in discussion and so on. And then also for preparing the video at the end. So, and the coaches, they use also this kind of guiding questions I've shown before for the steps in this model for ethical decision making. Guiding questions or mind-opening questions or the tools how you can lead the groups or the students in finding the solutions. We don't know what they will find as a solution, but they are helping to open their minds and possibly to find a common ground. So this is my presentation, how we used the model in this intercultural business ethics project. It's a didactic project. And also the case I've shown in the beginning, people analytics. This is a case we use in our digital ethics class, for example. And for both classes, intercultural business ethics and digital ethics, we developed a handbook, and the 2 handbooks are publicly available, open access books, and you can download them for free. So that means if you are interested in how to teach ethics, applied ethics, with the help of dialectical thinking, I think this could be 2 valuable sources.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much.
I guess I can understand what you mean. You mean the actions are the most important part of this process. And
yes.
Actually, at the end, it's the psychological or the physical harm one of the actors are doing. And okay, it depends how you would analyze conflicts. At the end, you're right. And in my view, how I think about human beings, we are still capable to think about our behavior. Not just the results of our genes, of our education, of our social context, results of our cultural group. And if the groups are in war, we can still think about and come to an own solution. This is a part of, in my view, of the capability of a human being. And I think for me, for example, human rights are common ground, could be. We know there are different understandings of the human rights. There are Islamic human rights declaration. There's a Islamic human rights declaration, an African human rights declaration. There's a South Asian human rights declaration. There's even a paper of the Communist Party of China on human rights. So, but this could be a common ground to find. I don't see another possibility. Otherwise, just the more powerful will win. And this is not an ethical solution. And my hope is that human rights are on a lower level the same values you have. For example, that you appreciate friendship, that you appreciate family. You can find in all the cultures. The golden rule: do not harm others if you don't want to be harmed by others, and so on. This reciprocity you can find in all the cultures. This could and should be a common basis, in my view.
I was wondering whether the opposite sides would see actions as being incongruent with the values that they'd been espousing in the dialogue. Thank you. I wonder too, related to that, whether for some people there's something possibly somewhat distasteful about negotiating this common ground, which really offends their sense of morality, you know, and that they have a kind of very clear moral principle. For example, they might say, well, you should never experiment on animals. And the company says, yes, but we have to experiment on animals because this is for the greater good of mankind, and eventually we'll find solutions to illnesses. But people say, no, absolutely, that's not justifiable, and therefore there's some kind of block there.
I'm not sure if they really use it outside, but we discuss different case studies in class. The final exam is an oral, for example, is an oral exam for the digital ethics class. And we ask them to present the case and discuss them, the cases. And then we have a look at I have a look at the thinking modes they use. Can they analyze a conflict in the way we want to use them? We don't expect the same solution as we found ourselves, but they should go through the process and find coherent way to argue for their solution. The solution is not the same. It doesn't have to be the same, but we expect from the students systematic way to deal with the problem and a coherent solution. And yes, otherwise they will not pass the exam. It's not about the individual thought forms. It's the process, it's the 5 steps in the model, and the guiding questions. They are built on the dialectical thinking cycle. So they learn how to deal with the case with the step-by-step model, that you have a the structure of the conflict, that you have a stakeholder analysis, that you try to find the common ground, take a decision, and then to implement measures, and then to reflect on the whole process. This step-by-step model we expect from them. Not the thinking modes, no, and not the individual thought forms in your systematic.
Bruno, can I ask, would you say that groups that are using the thinking cycle are more successful than groups that are just having a kind of free-for-all conversation in resolving value conflicts? Have you done A and B testing?
No,
in that way?
never done testing. Never done testing. I just can say that I use it. I use it for myself for any problem. The two models, the thinking cycle and the 4 quadrants, for me they are very helpful. And as you know, perhaps I'm also doing a longitudinal study on dialectical thinking. And when I show the participants how they think dialectically, they find this very helpful. They say, I never thought about how I do thinking, which kind of thinking modes I use most, for which topic. For example, when I talk about my job, I use structural thinking. Or when I use about myself, the self, house in Otto's terminology, myself, then I use transformational thinking, but not for the job, only for myself. This is very interesting for participants. And normally they say this helps them to think, and this would be also the initial step to do coaching with them. But I don't do coaching, I just collect data and give them a feedback. I give them a feedback, this is what I give them, and I collect the data for this study. But I didn't do A/B testing, no.
Could be an interesting PhD research project there for somebody. And I think Robert Keegan would probably approve of the idea of making an object of your thinking. Reminds me a bit of Mike Mascolo's idea that there's a kernel of truth in the opposing point of view, that if people kind of dig hard enough, they can come to accept as valid, and that brings somebody a little bit closer together with their opposite ideologue.
Your center is called Center for Applied Dialectics. Is this a model for applied dialectics? Does this make sense to you?
So the question is what you presented a model of applying dialectics?
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, the definition of dialectical thinking is indeed up for grabs to my mind. But I think what you've provided is a useful structure to frame a debate, which can, in Otto's terminology, open people's minds to a different perspective or different ideas, and therefore it's very much mind-opening. But exactly how dialectical it would be would, I think, depend a little bit on how people carry it out, and whether they can find a way to resolve the conflicts that emerge.
I used it in classes, and you know, this is a special setting. Students have to learn how to deal with a case, and it depends very much on the people involved. There are sometimes ingenious people especially in the digital ethics class, they produce ideas they never would have come in my mind. In the business ethics classes, I think it's more or less clear, but there are not so many new ideas. But this could be a stereotype what I'm producing now. But the computer science students, and they sometimes produce ideas, and they're completely new for me, and sometimes interesting, sometimes shocking also. Yeah. For example, to delegate ethical conflicts to AI. This would be shocking for me. I don't know what you think. But sometimes they have also very interesting ideas how to support, for example, ethical decision making, let's say in a democratic country, and for example, to how to develop a voter support system where you know which party will vote for which values, for example. This could be very helpful. This is also a beautiful idea, I think. So we call the questions guiding questions, as you see. Otto will call them mind-opening questions. You see the different perspective. I used the model in a didactic context to help the students to deal with unstructured problem. Yeah, so they are guiding questions in this context. And the meta-thinking framework, I think this is a mind-opening framework.
It seems a way to facilitate a richer conversation than you would get otherwise, Bruno. One thing that you haven't touched on is the intercultural differences. And of course, Peng and Nisbet did a fair amount of research into what they saw as the differences between Asian idea of dialectic and American students' approach to dialectic, with the idea that Asians were very happy to tolerate contradictions, whereas American students wanted to try and resolve those contradictions one way or the other. Did you notice anything, any strong cultural differences in the groups?
So our topic were value conflicts, not so much dialectics. I think what you ask now is the conception of dialectic or dialectics.
Oh, not so much, no, but I just thought that maybe some groups would be, would find the framework easier to use than others. That some groups would find it impossible to reconcile some of these ethical dilemmas.
No, cannot. No. Perhaps one experience it was that, for example, Chinese students, they don't make the difference between the legal system and the ethical systems. This is quite difficult for them. So if we ask for ethical argumentation, values and so on, they, for example, about privacy, normally they will talk about what is legal and what is not legal, what is allowed in the company and what is not allowed in the company. This was quite interesting. Also for Swiss students, for example, they asked why this is allowed, or this is why, for example, companies in China, they may take more or less every data they can get from the employees, can use them, because this is done widely, and so they don't see so much ethical problems here, because if it complies with the legal system, then it's okay. This was one common tendency, but couldn't say this is because of dialectics.
No,
Okay,
but I think Well, I think what you're suggesting is that there is a kind of cultural normative conception of of what makes for ethical practice, and that people will cling to that quite strongly, and they'll find it difficult to see the other person's or the other culture's attitude. And I wonder, why do you in Switzerland have all these rules about employee privacy? I mean, that's mad, isn't it? Yeah.
I would like to give you another example where I got the impression that students really dialectically learned from the process. And it's a case of child labor in South Africa. This is illegal. Child labor is illegal in South Africa. It's illegal in Switzerland. It's illegal in China. But a lot of children have to work just to have a living, to earn money for the families and so on. And if now the case goes like this, in a company, someone now got to know that a boy is 14, and now child labor is illegal. So what this manager should do? This is a real ethical dilemma. What could be a good solution, an ethical solution to this dilemma? And I think about it, and I will tell you what the students found out. Okay, first they started to discuss the problem, then they say it is illegal in all the countries. No problem. This boy should be what's that, redundant? Is this the word in English? Yeah? Okay. But then the family will lose a part of the income, or there is a lot of prostitution and so on, also among youngsters and so on. This is a terrible story then. What should this, this is a cultural aspect, and the students, they gave examples, own examples they met and so on. And at the end, they came to a solution that this company, and then the Swiss student gave an example what happens in Switzerland. For example, Swiss children, they go to apprenticeship normally. 60 or 70% of Swiss students, they first make an apprenticeship and then go to university. And they will work 2 days a week in a company. And they go to school during this time 2 days a week. So this could be a possible solution, also in South Africa. So the solution the students found then was that the company should keep the children. There should be opportunity to have a training for these children, and there should be a supervision for these children, an official governmental supervision for these children. So all of the participants could profit from the situation. And they found this was a good dialectical process. The students from South Africa, they learned something new. The Swiss students, they learned what the real situation is in South Africa. They have an unemployed rate among youngsters about 70 or 80%. This is incredible for Swiss students. So I found this this was a good example where the students learned a lot from each other, and from even the legal situation is clear for all the three countries. Don't know what you think about this case.
It sounded to me, Bruno, as though talking it through in the way they did was effective at loosening some of their preconceptions and assumptions, and so it was useful. I think the debate that we've been having has been very much around, to what extent does offering people a framework for thinking actually set their thinking free, or simply constrain it under a different model? And so there's limitations to any effort, I think, to teach dialectical thinking as a methodology. But it sounds in that case that you had at least a positive result. I want to thank you again, Bruno, very much for getting us going about ethics today.